The sound that stopped Dylan Cross in his tracks didn't belong in the quiet Montana forest. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't the cry of a deer. It was something alive and hurting. A deep, broken sound that pushed straight through the cold morning air and hit him square in the chest. He froze, one hand tightening on the handle of his old toolbox, every instinct telling him something was wrong. For a man who had spent his whole life fixing things, Dylan knew the difference between a problem and an emergency. And whatever was making that sound was the kind of emergency that didn't wait. He stepped off the fence line and pushed through the wet brush, boots cracking fallen branches, breath showing in the frost-bitten October air. The deeper he went, the louder the sound became. A slow, pained breathing, a heavy metal scrape. Then another. Then silence. Dylan's heart hammered as he shoved past a cluster of serviceberry bushes and stepped into a clearing he didn't even know existed. He stopped cold. At the base of an ancient oak tree, its trunk, thick as a wagon, lay the biggest horse Dylan Cross had ever seen. A giant black animal, its coat dull and matted, ribs showing through skin stretched too tight. But the worst part was the chains. Heavy iron chains wrapped around the horse's chest, neck, and legs. The metal had dug into its hide so deep that raw wounds covered the animal's body. The horse barely lifted its head. Its breath came out in ragged clouds. A single weak hoof scraped the frozen dirt. Dylan moved slowly, speaking in a calm voice even though his pulse was racing. "Easy there, boy. Easy. I'm not here to hurt you." That's when he saw it, a folded note tied to the chain by a piece of twine. With shaking hands, he opened it. His name is Goliath. "I can't feed him anymore. He's too big, too wild, too much trouble. Maybe someone else can save him. I'm sorry." No name, no explanation. Just a surrender, written by someone who had given up. Dylan felt something inside him twist. He had seen hard things in his life, but this was cruelty wrapped in desperation. The giant horse lifted his head and looked at him. Amber eyes, deep, aware, tired, pleading. It felt like the animal was asking a question without a sound. "Are you here to help me or to watch me die?" Dylan swallowed hard. He had nothing extra, almost no money, a ranch that barely held itself together. He wasn't even sure he could feed himself through the winter. He should have called the sheriff and walked away. That would have been the practical choice. But he couldn't, not after seeing those eyes. "I'm getting you out of here," he whispered. Goliath blinked slowly, as if accepting a promise no one had ever kept for him before. Dylan ran back to the ranch as fast as his legs would carry him. He grabbed every tool he could find. Bolt cutters, a saw, pliers, a pry bar. His breath tore in and out of his lungs as he rushed back to the clearing. The giant horse trembled as Dylan approached again, but he didn't fight. He stood still while Dylan worked through the web of icy chains. Every link cut free felt like lifting a weight off both of them. It took over an hour. Dylan's hands were shaking from cold and exhaustion by the time the last chain fell to the ground. Goliath didn't run, didn't even try. He just lay there as if he couldn't believe he was finally free. "Come on," Dylan said softly, "try for me." On the second try, Goliath pushed himself upright. His legs shook, his body swayed. For a moment, Dylan thought he would fall. But the horse stayed standing, breathing hard, head raised just a little higher. Step by step, they began the long walk back. The half-mile to the ranch felt like miles. Goliath stopped often, sides heaving, legs trembling. Dylan stayed right beside him, hand on the horse's neck, guiding him through the cold morning light. When they finally reached the edge of the ranch, something changed in the horse. His ears perked forward. His steps grew steadier. As if he understood, safety was close. Dylan opened the barn doors and led the horse inside. Everything was old, broken, unprepared for an animal this size. But it was shelter. It was hope. Hours later, When ranch owner Benjamin Whitmore returned from town and saw the massive black horse standing in their barn, he stopped dead. "Son," Benjamin said quietly, laying a hand on Goliath's neck, "that's not just any horse." Dylan waited, breath held. "That's a once-in-a-lifetime animal." Dylan looked at Goliath, bleeding, starving, exhausted, and knew he had already made up his mind. "I'm keeping him," he said. Benjamin studied the young man for a long moment. "Then you better be ready," the old rancher said. "Saving something this broken, it's gonna change you." Dylan nodded. He didn't know then how true those words were. He didn't know that saving Goliath would soon save an entire town. He didn't know the unbelievable things that were coming. He only knew one thing. For the first time in years, he felt alive. Goliath's first night at the ranch was a long one. Dylan checked on him every hour, afraid the giant horse might collapse or stop breathing. The barn was old, the roof creaked with every gust of wind, and the cold Montana air slipped through the gaps in the boards. But Goliath rested with his head on a bed of fresh straw, his breath slow and steady. At sunrise, Dylan stood at the barn door watching the horse. "You made it through the night," he whispered. Goliath lifted his head and gave a soft, low sound. Not a cry, not a groan, something like trust. Dr. Patricia Vance arrived soon after, her truck rattling into the yard. She stepped inside the barn, took one look at the horse, and let out a breath. "My God, Dylan! Where did you find him?" "In the forest, chained up, left to die." She moved slowly around Goliath, checking his wounds, his temperature, his breathing. The chains had left deep cuts, some infected. He was dangerously thin, and his muscles were weak from lack of use. But when Dr. Vance looked into Goliath's eyes, something in her expression softened. "He still has fight left in him," she said. "Most horses in this condition don't." Dylan nodded. "I could feel that when he looked at me." The vet smiled a little. "Then you two might just save each other." Over the next days, Dylan followed Drive, Vance's instructions carefully. Small meals every few hours, gentle walks in the morning, cleaning the wounds, talking to the horse so he stayed calm, and slowly Goliath began to heal. But it wasn't just his body changing. It was the way he acted. He started watching the ranch like he was studying it. He followed Dylan around the barn from stall to stall, his huge head drifting over Dylan's shoulder. When Dylan repaired a gate, Goliath stood beside him like a quiet helper. When Dylan sat on the fence to rest after a long day, Goliath would walk over, nudge his shoulder, then stand beside him like a friend who just wanted company. The bond forming between them grew stronger every day. One evening, Benjamin Whitmore came to the barn and leaned against the doorway as he watched Dylan brushing Goliath's coat. "You ever think maybe that horse found you for a reason?" the old rancher asked. Dylan didn't look up. "Feels that way sometimes." "Most folks don't stumble onto miracles by accident," Benjamin said. "Sometimes you get chosen." Dylan wasn't sure what to say back, but he kept brushing Goliath, and the horse lowered his head until it nearly touched Dylan's shoulder. The first sign that Goliath was special came 2 weeks later. A pickup truck stopped at the edge of the ranch. A mother stepped out with her daughter, a girl about 8, shoulders slumped, eyes sad, holding a stuffed rabbit close to her chest. "This is Lisa," the mother said softly. "She's been having a hard time. Heard you had a horse. People say he's gentle." Dylan hesitated. He's still recovering. Still weak. But something in Lisa's quiet face made him open the barn door anyway. Goliath was resting inside. When he saw the girl, he didn't just look at her. He focused on her, like he felt something. He took one slow step forward. Then another. Lisa froze. Her mother held her shoulders. But Goliath lowered his massive head to the child's height, soft breath, brushing her hair. Lisa reached a trembling hand forward and touched his nose. And for the first time in months, the little girl smiled. Her mother covered her mouth, tears filling her eyes. Dylan stood frozen, watching something he didn't understand. From that day on, people started talking about a horse who was too wild to save, but gentle enough to calm troubled hearts. About a ranch hand who rescued him with nothing but stubborn hope. Small-town whispers traveled fast, and soon folks began stopping by the ranch just to see Goliath, a retired veteran who hadn't spoken in weeks, a teenage boy on the wrong path, a lonely widow, a child terrified of loud noises. One by one, they met Goliath, and each time, something changed in them. When Marcus Williams, a 16-year-old known for trouble, walked into the barn with his hands shoved in his pockets, Dylan braced for the worst. But Goliath walked right up to the boy, sniffed his sleeve, and nudged him gently. The teenager knelt down beside the giant horse and whispered something. Dylan didn't hear the words, but he saw the tears, and after that day, Marcus returned again and again, helping muck stalls, repair fences, and feed Goliath. A strange peace began knitting its way through the ranch. But the most surprising change of all was happening within Dylan himself. His days no longer felt heavy. His nights were no longer restless. And every morning when Goliath gave a soft sound of greeting, Dylan felt something he hadn't felt in years. Purpose. Benjamin noticed it too. One night over dinner he said, "That horse is doing more than healing. He is waking people up, people who needed something to believe in." Dylan didn't argue. Because the truth was simple. Goliath wasn't just recovering, he was transforming. And the whole town of Copper Ridge was about to discover just how incredible this once-abandoned horse truly was. Spring arrived in Copper Ridge with warm breezes, fresh grass, and a strange new feeling spreading through the little Montana town. People were smiling more, talking more. Hope was returning in small, quiet ways. And every path led back to one place, the Whitmore Ranch. More specifically, to the giant black horse who should have died in the forest. By April, Goliath looked like a completely different animal. His ribs no longer showed. His coat shined like polished stone. His steps were strong and smooth. Yet it wasn't his strength that shocked people. It was his heart. One morning, a family from 2 counties over arrived with their son Kevin. He was 12, born with cerebral palsy and unable to walk without help. His parents explained they only wanted him to meet Goliath. Just meet him. That alone, they said, would be a blessing. But Goliath had something else in mind. He lowered himself onto the grass, easing his massive body down until he lay flat beside Kevin's wheelchair. Then, slowly and carefully, he positioned himself so Kevin could reach his neck. Kevin stared with wide eyes. "Mom, he wants me to get on." Dylan's breath caught. "Only if you feel safe, buddy." With his parents helping, Kevin used every ounce of strength he had to pull himself up onto Goliath's broad back. It took time, painful, exhausting time, but Goliath never moved a muscle. And when the boy was finally settled and holding onto the horse's mane, Goliath stood up. Kevin gasped. His mother cried. His father covered his mouth with both hands. Goliath took one slow step, then another, then began walking around the pasture with a focus and gentleness that no human could have taught him. Kevin's laughter filled the entire ranch, ringing across the fields like something holy. "I feel like I'm flying!" he shouted. Dylan wiped his eyes. He wasn't the only one. After that day, something changed. Not just for Kevin, but for Dylan too. He realized Goliath wasn't just a rescued horse. He was a healer, a guide, a miracle wearing a black coat. Benjamin Whitmore knew it too. "You can't keep this to yourself anymore, son," the old rancher said one evening. "The world needs this horse." Dylan knew he was right, and with that came the hardest decision he'd ever made. They turned part of the Whitmore Ranch into a therapy center. Not a fancy hospital, not a commercial riding school. Just a safe place where broken people could meet the horse who understood them better than most humans did. Donations arrived from strangers who heard the stories. Volunteers stepped forward. Builders offered labor. Dr. Vance came out of retirement without hesitation. In just months, the Goliath Recovery Ranch was born, and Goliath became the heart of it all. Veterans with nightmares slept peacefully after spending an hour with him. Children with anxiety learned to breathe easier. Teenagers lost in anger began opening up. Lonely widows found comfort. Burned-out parents rediscovered hope. In every story, Dylan saw pieces of himself. The broken man he once was, the man Goliath had unknowingly saved. One evening, years after that first frostbitten morning, Dylan stood by the pasture gate watching the sun set behind the mountains. The fields were green, the barns were full. The ranch was thriving. Goliath walked up beside him, nudging his shoulder in the same gentle way he always had. "You did all this," Dylan whispered. "You changed this whole place." The horse lowered his head into Dylan's chest the same way he had the night Dylan freed him. For a long moment, they stood in silence. Man and horse, two souls who had found each other at the edge of despair and built something beautiful from the broken pieces. People in Copper Ridge still tell the story. How a poor rancher found a dying horse chained to a tree. How that horse became a miracle. How hope rode back into town on 4 powerful legs. And how one unbelievable rescue didn't just save a life. It saved hundreds.